So this first one is Officer and a Maverick from the Western Heart series. The author, Teresa Southwick. And I'm going to read the back to you. From mistrust to love. Lainey Dalton is everyone's favorite ace-in-the-hole bartender, but one unfortunate evening has her singing and dancing, fully clothed, in the park fountain on the 4th of July. To make a bad moment worse, she's hauled off to jail, dripping wet, by Detective Russ Campbell. Ever since then, Lanny's been reluctant to revisit the case of the spiked wedding punch. Helping the arrestingly handsome Russ crack the case could risk breaching family confidentiality. And Laney never breaks a promise. So why does Russ keep showing up at Ace? Now, with that mouth-watering tidbit, let's go in here and see. It says, Teresa Southwick lives with her husband in Las Vegas, the city that reinvents itself every day. An avid fan of romance novels, she is delighted to be living out her dream of writing for Harlequin. And it says, to my brothers, Jim, Mike, Dan, and Chris, thanks for always being there. You're my heroes. I love you guys. So we're going to go to the very first paperclip, which ironically, this is the book that I finished today. And the other book is over there, so I just hope to get to it. Let me see where I marked it so we can... Okay, page 42. Okay. Do you have any nieces or nephew? No to all the above. What about you? I have 2 sisters and 3 brothers. The oldest 2 were at Braden and Jennifer's wedding. What? He asked when she stopped talking. Nothing, but her body language changed. She sat up straighter and shook her head. There was something she didn't want to talk about. My brother Caleb got married last year. My sister Paige took the plunge the year before that, and now she and her husband have a baby boy. Good for them. Yeah, they seem to be happy, but I'm not sure it would work for me. On a night full of surprises, that might have been the biggest one yet. Doesn't every girl dream of a long white dress and walking down the aisle? She laughed. I'm not every girl. And in case you didn't get the memo, a woman doesn't need a man to be happy and fulfilled. Spoken like a woman who has been dumped. He was watching her and saw the slight tightening of her full lips, indicating he'd gotten that one right. Irritated, she leaned in closer to make a point. Is that observation based on crack investigation skill, Detective Campbell? Nope, it's based more on the gut instinct. Wow, who knew that I was going to get locked up with Dr. Phil? I have my moments. He could feel the heat from her body, her breath on his cheek, and the sensations were taking him in a place he was very trying hard not to go. You know, Lanny, it's none of my business, but I don't think you should let one bad experience sour you on marriage. Why, because you're married and highly recommend it? No. Ever been married? No. Then how are you qualified to endorse marriage? There's a lot to be said for it. He hoped that she didn't sound as lame as he thought, especially because it didn't really answer the question. He was just kind of like the way her eyes flashed when she was annoyed, and it made the green and gold flecks stand out, warm colors that hinted at the fire inside. Like what? She demanded. Well, he thought for several moments, having someone waiting for you at the end of the day. He missed that when Alexis walked out on him. Someone there to listen to you bellyache about the bad stuff and celebrate the good. I have girlfriends for that. She slid a little closer, practically quivering with indignation. Frankly, I don't get the appeal of being with one person for the rest of your life. Guys just stand you up. They make promises that they don't intend to keep. I mean, seriously. The very compression, tying the knot, sounds an awful lot like a noose around your neck. You said yourself that marriage is working for your brother and your sister, he challenged. Yeah, well, those 2 always were the black sheep of the family. Who wants to be tied down? Take the plunge. Think about that. Every expression referring to the wedded bliss has a negative connotation. And I don't think that I'd like to have to answer someone else when I want to go and come. If that's what she wanted, why should it bother him? And that, in a nutshell, was the damn problem. It didn't bother him. The idea of her playing the field seemed wrong. When confronted with right and wrong tweaked his temper every time. You know what, he said, forget I mentioned it. She rolled her eyes. How come your badge has all been out of shape? You brought it up. No, you did, he reminded her, asking about my family, then telling me about yours. I thought most guys wanted to be bachelors, but you're one of the most pushing and the perks of the matrimony. I disagree with everything you said, and now you're more crabby. She stopped. Make that more crabby. She was full of intensity, capable of strong feelings. More than his next breath, he wanted to hold all his passion in his arms, and every rational part of his brain, now drenched in testosterone, was telling him to move far, far away from her as he could get. The problem was the door was locked, and that meant he couldn't go anywhere. Shutting down his conversation was the only choice. You are absolutely right. Being on my own is good. I like being on my own. His face was only inches from hers. The best thing about my life is not having any commitments. A girl could get a very serious case of whiplash the way you change your mind. Just what makes you so happy about not being committed? Before Russ even knew what was happening, he closed the small distance between them. Because if I were committed, I couldn't do this. He planted a kiss right on her lips, and didn't know he was going to do that until his lips touched hers. But once it happened, he couldn't seem to stop. She, without a doubt, that sweetest mouth that he'd ever tasted. He cupped her smooth, soft cheek in his hand, ready to go wherever she would ask him or take him. Her sigh of contentment said that she'd take him anywhere, somewhere special to make him forget even where they were. That thought was like getting a bucket of ice water dumped over his head. They were in the jail, damn it. With an effort, he pulled back and dropped his hand. I am so sorry. That was wrong. Lanny blinked at him, trying to focus her fuzzy brain. Why? I'm an officer of the law. Using a position of power to take advantage of you is the very definition of sexual harassment. You have every right to be upset. Upset? Lanny wasn't the least bit upset. He finally noticed her. He kissed her, and it felt really, really good. She wanted him to take notice of her some more. I'm not upset. That was 44, 45, 46, and 47. Moving to our next paperclip. Page 84 is a very small paragraph. The moment he laid eyes on Laney, he knew he was getting close to her, and it would be borrowing trouble. The time had come to look trouble in her big brown eyes and hope it didn't expect to be paid back. So after months of avoiding her, his job was to talk to the very woman he had no reason to trust. The hell of it was, the person he mistrusted the most was himself. Okay, moving forward. Page 86. How are things with you and Kathy? Separation's not doing it for her. She wants a divorce. Told me today. That explained a lot. I'm sorry, she said. The couple had a 3-year-old daughter. Any chance of you two working things out? He shrugged. She wanted me to go to counseling, but I said no. Why is that? Laney saw stubborn slide into his expression and held up her hand. Sorry, it's none of my business. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. Nah, it's okay, he shrugged again. I just don't see how telling a stranger our problems is going to solve them. The screen door behind her screeched and slammed shut, but whoever it was could wait just a minute. I don't know either, she said to Wes, but what can it do to hurt to talk to someone? An objective stranger could give you some things to think about. Just seems like nonsense to me, he said stubbornly. She scooped ice into a glass, then squirted soda water into it. After dropping a lime into the bubbly liquid, she set it on the bar beside his beer bottle. If you don't do anything, it's over, right? So you've got nothing to lose by trying it Kathy's way. And if it turns out to be nonsense, like you say, no harm, no foul. At least someday you can tell your little girl that you tried everything to keep your family together. He stared at her for several moments, then nodded. Never thought about it like that. See, she smiled, talking to someone can change your perspective, get you to see things differently. Can't fix a problem you don't know what. I'll consider it, thanks, Laney. Don't mention it. She set a paper-wrapped straw beside his soda water. Let me know if you need anything else. That was 86, 87, and 88. The reasons I decided to choose those phrases from those pages is because with my dear bombshell, I feel like I've helped a lot of people, and some people would be like, well, why does she give advice if she's not in a relationship? Because it never hurts to talk to someone with an objective opinion. That proves it. Okay, moving on, page 92. Gage vouched for you. He rested his forearm on the edge of the scarred bar, but I've learned not to take anything or anyone at face value. Needing something to do with her hands, she grabbed a damp rag and used to wipe it in the already clean wooden surface in front of him. That sounds really cynical. I've got my reasons. A girl didn't deal with the public as much as Laney did without picking up instincts about people. Some of what happened that night was fuzzy, but other things were crystal clear. She remembered how he guessed about how her bad relationship experience was, and she was going to return the favor. Spoken like a man who's been dumped. Want to talk about it? The tough cop facade slipped for a second. Then he recovered and ignored the offer. My job is all about dealing with people who break the law, then they lie through their teeth. If that doesn't entitle a guy to be wary, I don't know what does. I suppose. Look, Gage sent me here to talk to you. He says you know pretty much everyone in this town, and you're an astute judge of character, that you might be able to shed some light on what went on that day. Maybe someone had a little too much to drink and started bragging. Maybe you overheard something that would at least give us a lead. Now, to tell you what happened, there was a wedding, there was alcohol poured into the punch, and now they're trying to find out who poured the alcohol into the punch. Lanny thought for a moment, but knew something like that would have stuck in her mind. She shook her head. If I had, I'd have brought it to Gage's attention right away. Okay, then. He slid off the stool, apparently anxious to get away from her. But Gage is right. I do know everyone, and I can read people pretty well unless romantic feelings are involved, she said reluctantly. She completely misread the guy who walked out on her. So I was right about you getting dumped. His gaze slid to hers. Want to talk about it? Wow, a man willing to listen? That's a surprise. She folded her arms over her chest. But as you said, it's part of your job description. Pretty much. Well, you're off the hook, Detective. I don't want to talk about it except to say that my romantic life consists of listening to sad stories of folks who come into this bar here. Yeah, I heard you talking to that guy on the end. She glanced over her shoulder and saw Wes finishing off his water. It's even sadder when the kids are caught in the middle. I know what you mean. He rested his palm flat on the bar. Okay, then. If you do hear anything else, can I count on you to pass it along to someone in law enforcement? Of course, but I really want to help find whoever did this. Get in line. Seriously, like I said, I know nearly everyone in town, and I have information about things that happened way back when. Feuds, fights, disagreements, someone who might have had a reason to do harm. I could be of help. That's okay. Look, Russ, I understand why you don't want to trust me, but Gage assured you that I'm on the up and up. Don't blow off a potential resource because of what happened. Heat burned up her neck into her cheeks because of the list of sins under the heading of what happened, including sleeping with him. She couldn't go there. This is my town, she continued, and I have a personal stake in helping to protect the people that I care deeply about. You know, you'd never forgive yourself if someone got hurt and you didn't do anything possible. I know I wouldn't. I understand what you're saying, Lanny, but she held up her hand to stop him from saying no. In the spirit of fair disclosure, you should know that I'm going to do it anyway. I'll keep my ears open and ask questions, so you can either let me go work with you or I'll just go rogue. Okay, and that was 93, 94, 95. And I stopped marking it at 95, so we're going further on. Page 121 is short. At least Jordan Leigh and Will found love and got a happy ending out of that night. They got together. That's the couple that got married. Laney and Russ did too, but love had nothing to do with it, and now he acted as if nothing happened. She didn't know what to make of it. If she were a man, maybe she could pretend nothing of consequence took place, but she didn't. She wasn't a man, and she was irritated that he didn't seem the least bit interested in her. Still, there was no doubt in her mind that the word would spread about their going out to dinner. She got more than a little satisfaction out of the fact to maintain his cover while working on this case. He would have to deal with her up close and personal. Next paperclip. Page 125. So folks in town think we're dating. Her brown eyes were wary, waiting for a reaction. A man could easily get caught up in those eyes, but Russ was trying his damnedest not to. But this temporary assignment required him to talk to her, and the word on the street was that they were going out, meaning he was interested. Just because he wasn't happy about that, it didn't make the conclusion wrong. He studied her. You don't look upset. Why is that? We don't have to be covert about talking to each other. We can share each other's information, and everyone will just think you're courting me. Do I look like the kind of guy who courts? But he couldn't help smiling. She came out of some of the darndest things, and it was getting harder to overlook the way her sunshine lit up the darkest corners of his soul. Call it what you want, she said. Courting, flirting, set up your cap for, woo, cozy up to, date. I'm your ticket to not being an outsider. If people think you've got the hots for me, they'll let down their guards with you. There was no thinking about it. He definitely had the hots for her. He proved that in the jail cell because he couldn't seem to help himself, and he hadn't been able to forget her ever since. But she was right. That's 125 and 126. Okay. Sometimes when I mark it, I don't mark it very well. I just mark where I end, but I don't mark the beginning, which doesn't help you all. Okay, so Gage is his boss. Okay, and she smiled brightly, but the expression didn't match her words. I really don't understand how you can use me in this investigation, and I still don't believe that I might be responsible for doing that to my friends and neighbors. My family were there too. Before he could tell her that she had a point, she walked away. But that saying about keeping your friends close and your enemies closer kept running through his mind. Still, there was a part of him that didn't buy that Laney Dalton was an enemy. He trusted Gage Christensen. The man had urged Rush to use her as a reliable source. In spite of his respect for Gage, he held tight to his skepticism. Russ had a sneaking suspicion that his doubts about Laney were all that stood between him and breaking his promise not to let another woman make a fool of him. Page 139, short paragraph. Russ wanted to believe him, but refused to let go of his doubts. Maybe that was an overabundance of caution, but he tended to think it was more about keeping her at a distance. Letting down his guard was the first step in trusting, and he wouldn't do that again. Page 148. It's not serious. Russ and I are just getting to know each other, she said. That's right, he confirmed, but something flickered in his eyes. Are you sure about this? Travis asked about him. That's her brother. No one gets a guarantee about a person, she snapped. That's why it's called becoming acquainted. And really, it's no one's business but mine. Understood, her brother said, but there was disapproval in his dark stare that he leveled at her. Page 164, 165. Hello. And there was the sugar and spice with a splash of sexy voice that took his breath away. Hey, Lanny. Russ, what's up? Damned if he knew, but now he was on the spot. I know Friday and Saturday are busy nights at the bar. Just wondered if you heard anything. Not so far. He looked around the room, and he'd been renting at Strickland's boarding house. It was neat as a pin, lonely as a spacewalk. The bed was covered with a quilted spread without a single wrinkle. That made him think about the twisted sheets and tangled legs. The problem that was hearing her voice was that it gave him a powerful need to see her. Maybe it's time to shake up the investigation, he suggested. How? Good question. He blew out a long breath. Maybe we should get together and brainstorm. Well, you got plans. The depth of his disappointment was surprising. Another time. Not so fast. The thing is, my mom cooks dinner for the family every Sunday and expects us all to be there. Very few excuses get sanctioned. I have to figure out what to tell her. You're not planning to say anything about being involved in the investigation? He didn't like the idea of her not having that excuse to see her. Of course not. I just meant it was important for me to come up with an acceptable reason for not being here. Since I'm not bleeding, on fire, or just had a baby, I need to get creative. What about meeting my family? Well, she said thoughtfully, they think that we're going out, so I guess it's the next logical step. As lies go, it would probably work, because one of the ironclad Dalton rules is family first. It wouldn't be a lie if we actually go to the farm, and a penny in for a penny, in for a pound, he thought. I'll pick you up in an hour. Okay. Russ didn't want to be the truth, but suddenly his day off looked a whole lot more exciting. That was 164, 165. 186. I'm going to go get Brad to ask me out on a date, and then I'll find out what he knows. No, Lanny, it could be dangerous, and... She slammed the door and hurried out to the house, effectively cutting off his protest. Frustration rolled through him, and he hit the steering wheel with the flat palm of his hand. Pain radiated up his arm, but it also cut through his irritation and let in a dose of reality. It wasn't his detective instincts that were objecting to her going out with Brad Crawford. He didn't want her alone with another guy. He was jealous. Moving forward to page 201. Rosie picked up a tumbler and started to polish the glass with a rag. So I hear you and Laney have been hanging out together. You heard right. He took a sip of his beer. Why is that? Why is what? He hedged. The older woman smiled shrewdly, as if she knew he'd dodged the question deliberately. It's like this. You come into the Ace for months and never get a pretty girl like Laney a tumble. Then the two of you are stuck in the jail cell for hours while everyone at the wedding reception was 3 sheets to the wind. That can be explained, he protested, although he still didn't know why she'd taken his keys to the cell. No doubt, but she put the glass down, then picked up another one and started polishing. But I haven't made my point yet. Page 202. Okay, whatever it was, he knew he wouldn't like it. So the longer it took to get there, the better. Please continue. Thanks. Now, where was I? She thought for a moment, then nodded. Right. Locked in a jail cell together. Then 2 months go by, and the sheriff still doesn't know who doctored the punch that day that you haven't shown for your face here at this bar. But he hires you to investigate. That's true, he agrees. Suddenly you and Lanny are hanging out, spending a lot of time together. She met his gaze. Why is that exactly? We're getting to know each other. So I heard. Dating. She sounded skeptical, which was actually very perceptive of her. Do you have a problem with that? It all depends on how you define problem. Why don't you tell me how you define it, he suggested. I intend to. She put down the glass and the rag and rested her hands on the scarred wood of the bar. I've known Lanny for a few years now. She's a good girl, and I'm very fond of her. I watched her go out with several different men. I've seen her in love or infatuated. Even smitten a time or two, whatever you want to call it when a woman falls for a guy. Russ didn't like the flare of jealousy that streaked through him at the mention of Lanny with other guys. I'm still waiting for you to get to the point. There was an odd smile on her face as if she knew what he was feeling and approved. A moment later it was gone, and all that remained was a warning. I've seen her in various stages of a relationship, but I've never seen her act the way she is with you right now. Maybe that's good. Or maybe it isn't. She drilled him with a fiercely protective look. Lanny's got a heart stomped on once, and I won't stand by and do nothing while it happens again. That's my point. Got it. So we're clear? She demanded. Yes, ma'am. Good. Nice talking with you. Enjoy your beer. Rosie turned and walked away, hips swaying. Russ figured that the woman had missed her calling and could have been a brilliant career in law enforcement. It wasn't often he knew how it felt to be interrogated, but he did now. And the experience was illuminating, but not in the way he would have expected. First the sheriff had stood up for Lanny, and now her boss had made her allegiance clear. Neither of those two would be labeled a fool, which meant that Lanny Dalton inspired loyalty in the people around her, not just her family. That would be impossible to pull off if she wasn't trustworthy. So he had to take her off the suspect list, even if she was only on it in his head. But something unexpected to him after Rosie's revelation about Lanny's love life. Russ knew she'd been dumped. She told him when they were in jail cell that she'd sworn off men. Now he wanted to know more about the jerk who had stomped on her heart, and he was going to ask when she got off work. That was 201, 202, 203, and 204. 208. Okay, she's off work now. So before you do, can I ask you a question? About what? That was 207, 208. The guy who broke your heart. The chill in the air penetrated her thin sweater, and she shivered without a word. Russ slipped off the battered brown leather jacket and dragged it around her shoulders. It felt good, warm from his body, like being wrapped in his arms, safe. What did Rosie say to you? She pulled the edges of the jacket closer around her. He leaned his elbows on the hitching rail in front of her. For one thing, she's suspicious of what's going on with you and me. Your boss is a very observant woman. Suspicious how? He shrugged. She noticed me coming in for a while, but you and I didn't get friendly until recently when Gage hired me to work on the case full time. Is that why you stayed tonight, to prove something to her? Partly. He glanced at her, but she warned me not to stomp on your heart like the last guy did. Now I'm curious about him. Rosie is protective of all the girls. Don't worry about her. I'm not, but once you told me that a woman doesn't need a man to be happy and fulfilled. That sounds a little disillusioned woman to me. The subtext was that he was concerned about her, and that sent warm fuzzy feelings sliding through her. Don't lose any sleep over it. "That's not why I ask," he said, "but what she told me is motivation for that remark of yours, and I'd like to know what he did to you." There was no point in refusing to talk about it. Anyone in town could tell him and her sad story. She leaned back against the hitching rail and met his gaze. Jason Harvey was a good-looking cowboy who sweet-talked me until hell wouldn't have it. He had me at Darlin'. What happened? He told me he'd come to the Red Rust Creek Falls to buy up land. After the flood 2 years ago, some folks just didn't have it in them to rebuild and walked away from their property. Jace talked a good game about developing it. I see. I was really interested in him, and as we've already established, I know a lot of people in town. I introduced him to anyone who might be able to get his dream off the ground. What happened? Someone who didn't have stars in their eyes asked the sheriff to run a background check on him, and the bad stuff turned up. He conned people out of money in a phony real estate scheme. When the heat was on here in town, he disappeared without a word to me. He not only broke her heart, she felt as if he damaged her reputation. Some people trusted him because she did. Now she felt stupid, felt as if she let her friends down. Is it weird that his not saying goodbye, not facing me at all, is what bothered me the most? Maybe that was simpler and easier for you to grab onto than deal with. As opposed to the fact that he made a fool of me and used me, she said. Lanny, Russ dragged his fingers through his hair in a way. I'm using you and I feel guilty about that. Completely different. You're not after something pretending to care about me to get it. She thought about that. Well, I guess you are, but I'm in on it. But by mutual consent, we're putting on an act to achieve a common goal for the greater good. That's 207, 208, 209, 210. Here's 211 and 212. He didn't look convinced. Still, I want you to know that your help is appreciated. Are you breaking up with me? She teased. That sounds an awful lot like things are over. If it would be easier, you could text me. He flashed a smile. Unfortunately, the moon was bright enough to highlight how adorable he looked. What kind of guy do you take me for? A good guy. She tapped her lip. At the very least, we should have a fight. Otherwise, how would it look when I go out with Brad Crawford to pump him for information? I thought we agreed you were going to wait on that, he said sharply. The smile disappeared and she missed it. We didn't agree on anything. You just said it wasn't a good idea. I stand by that. He looked down at her, and I think you should let that strategy go. I disagree. So far, he's the only one who seemed to have the most to gain from getting the town drunk. What's the big deal if I talk to him, butter him up a little to make him let his guard down? The big deal is that a date with him could be very dangerous. He's guilty and suspects that you're on to him. What if I do in a very public place? The bar, for instance. I still don't like it. You have no experience with that sort of thing, and in my opinion, holding off for now would be best. You're the professional, she said, shrugging. I'll defer to your judgment, but if we don't get a break soon, I'm going to contact Brad. Let's talk it over first. Okay, as long as an opportunity doesn't present itself before I can do that. Please don't go rogue. His voice was wry. I make no promises, she said. Now I really have to go. Okay. Page 224. She was looking for a flaw in him because her feelings were growing deeper. But she had no clue how he really felt. He gave her a kiss here, a compliment there, saying she was special, but what did that mean? And why did he refuse to open up about himself? But she knew one thing for sure: until that spiked punch mystery was solved, she wouldn't know whether he was just seeing her because of the investigation. If so, he would disappear when it was over, and she needed to know one way or the other. It was time to speed things up on this case. That meant chatting up Brad Crawford, even if Russ didn't like the idea. Page 241. When I walked up a little while ago, you were denying that I was your boyfriend. You were just about to define what we are. Thanks to your timely arrival, I didn't have to, so I guess you saved me tonight after all. Her boyfriend, if only. Getting a glimpse of something she couldn't have was a real mood breaker. And she was ready to be gone. And now, if you'll excuse me, you have my report. I need to go. Again, he didn't budge. What would you have told Brad about us? What are we, Laney? Page 242. I don't know. Co-investigators, she shrugged. I told him we were getting to know each other, just friends. Chancing a look at him, she asked, are we? That's not quite right. Exasperating man. What did that mean? She thought about what he'd started to say earlier, that he'd come to stop her from doing something. He hadn't finished the sentence, and now she wanted to know what he was about to say. Why did you really come here tonight, Russ? We both know that I wasn't in any danger from Brad. He's not an idiot or a psychopath. Even if he's guilty, there's no way he would have hurt me, especially here. What did you come here to stop me from doing? He looked at her, and his hazel eyes glittered, making them more green than brown. Intensity rolled off him so thick that she could almost touch it. I was about to stop you from leaving with Brad, he said finally. I wouldn't have done that, she protested. Sure, I bought him a beer, but that didn't mean anything. I could have told him here there was no spark. You didn't have to bother coming over. Yeah, I did. Why, I had him right where I wanted him. I came here because there's somewhere I want you, Lonnie, and it isn't here at Ace in the Hole. The truth was beginning to dawn on her. Are you jealous of Brad? Yes, that single word was almost a hiss. There's no reason to be. Telling him there's no spark would have been the honest-to-God truth. I wouldn't go anywhere with him. That's page 241, 242, 243. Page 259. I'm hoping that when I skip all these pages, it makes you want to pick up this book and find out what happened in between all this. Now she's finding out Russ's story of the woman that broke his heart. My fiancé didn't think so. You were engaged? She looked surprised. Alexis? Yes, he stood and started pacing the room. Alexis Davidson. Pretty name. It fit her. She was beautiful. He stopped walking and looked down at her. I needed a job. When I told her about the one on the force in Kalispell, she said no way was she moving to a two-bit town in the backwoods, Montana. If she loved you, she would have gone anywhere just to be with you. Then I guess she didn't. Some detective he was, that hadn't seen the truth. It never even crossed my mind that I'd lose the career I worked my butt off for, and the woman I loved because I did the right thing. Lanny shook her head. I'm sorry she hurt you, but it seems to me that you dodged a bullet there. How so? That woman was, probably still is, shallow as a cookie sheet. If she couldn't see that you're a good man, with character and the courage of his own convictions. Then there's this little thing in the marriage vows, for better or for worse. The going got tough and she got going. Lanny's eyes blazed with anger and disapproval. She didn't know what she had, and she didn't deserve you. You're better off without her. You think so? Russ wondered if Lanny was as loyal as she seemed. I know so, and I'm not so sure which is worse, having her leaving you, or good men who don't take pride in supporting each other but didn't support one another of their own. Yeah, I learned the hard way that having someone's back doesn't mean it's okay to lie for them. Lanny went still for just a second, then looked up at him. There was a plea in her eyes that said she knew what he was getting at. Sometimes having someone's back means you can't say anything at all. The words opened up a hollow feeling in his gut. She wasn't going to tell him why she made him arrest her, or kept him locked up off the street. Damn it! Now as the line was drawn, and Russ had to figure out whether or not he could risk losing it, even for Lanny. That's 259, 260, 261. Okay, starting at page 272. If I didn't, I wouldn't have asked. Her heart was pounding hard, so what's wrong? Okay, he toyed with the handle on his coffee mug. I keep going back to that night, that 4th of July. You made it impossible for me not to arrest you. I need to know why. And I told you that I can't tell you, but it has nothing to do with... He reached for the check. We're done here. Wait, Russ, please try to understand. I have a very good reason for what I did. Ask anyone, and they'll tell you that I'm an upstanding person who follows the rules. She thought for a moment, except maybe at the boarding house. He didn't smile. I know all of that, but honesty is the cornerstone of trust, and I can't overlook the fact that there's something you're not telling me. This thing isn't mine to tell. Haven't you ever made a promise to someone, a vow to keep something to yourself? Yes, and my word is very important to me, but when laws are broken, everything changes. She remembered the look on his face when he told her about the woman he loved not supporting him at probably the lowest point in his life, a violation of trust that left a mark. It was making him dig in and not give an inch now. This isn't entirely about obeying the law or honesty, is it, Russ? His mouth pulled tight and a muscle jerked in his jaw. I was blindsided once. It's not a feeling that I ever want to experience again. That cost me my career. Now I have a second chance and I'm not going to blow it. Before she could collect her thoughts and tell him she was nothing like his ex, he tossed some bills on the table. Keep the change, he said. Without another word, he stood up and walked out the door without looking back even once. Well, she had more to say, and if Russ thought this was the end, he didn't really know her at all. That was 272, 273, and 274. Page 281. He was still standing in the doorway looking at her in the hall. I'm surprised to see you. I took a shot. Russ wanted to hold her so bad that it hurt deep down inside. He wanted to kiss and break Melba Strickland's ridiculous rule, but he held back. A shot at what? She tucked a long, shiny strand of hair behind her ear. Coming to talk to you. It felt like there was more to say. That's up to you, and there it was. The elephant in the room. The secret she wouldn't give up. Can I come in? Sure. He stepped aside, and she walked past the scent of the burrowing inside to his warm as blood. He closed the door, then turned and saw her staring at the bed, more specifically the duffel with the clothes beside it. You're leaving? It sounded like an accusation, a breach of trust, coming from her. That was ironic and got his defenses up. I was only ever staying a couple of weeks, but your time isn't up yet, she protested. It will be soon. So you're packing early? Her tone was flat. I guess that means that you can't wait to get back to your regularly scheduled life. Truthfully, his life was a mess. He tried so hard not to let Laney matter to him, and now he knew it was going to rip him up to say goodbye. When he walked away from this assignment and this woman, all he'd have left from his job would be a Kalispell PD, and it was safer to focus on that, on his career. But damn it, right this second, while he was close enough to feel the heat of her body, the scent of her skin, he couldn't imagine being alone. And the thought gave him a hollow feeling in the pit of his stomach. He'd better get used to it. Cases in Kalispell had probably been piling up on my desk while I've been gone. I'm going to be busy when I go back. So you're telling me you won't be able to be coming to Rust Creek Falls to fill in when the sheriff asks? No, because seeing her with no way to bridge that divide between them would probably kill him. But she'd come here to say something, and the least he could do was hear her out. What did you want to talk about? Are you even going to say goodbye? There was a world of hurt in her eyes. Never mind, it's not important now. Sorry I bothered you. Hope I didn't get you in trouble with the Stricklands. You didn't bother me, Laney. He stepped, and when she opened the door, Bye, Russ, without saying another word, and then he was alone. Not even the fragrance of her perfume lingering in the room could stop the empty feeling from remaining inside him. He kicked himself for not being able to get past his past. Laney wasn't at the liberty to explain her behavior that night, and if he hadn't been sucker punched at the worst time in his life, her refusal wouldn't matter. He could overlook it. But even though all his instincts were telling him that Laney was loyal and honest as she was beautiful, he kept tripping over his doubts. And as much as he wanted to go after her, Laney's secret was standing in the way. Okay, that's page 281, 82, 83, and 84. 285 and 86. On the way to the ranch the next morning, Laney was tired. It tended to happen when you couldn't sleep, and that was Russ Campbell's fault. If he hadn't told her that last night he wouldn't be back to Rust Creek Falls, she could have slept like a baby. But he did tell her, and he meant it. Tears she'd been fighting since walking away from the boarding house filled her eyes, and that made her mad. He wouldn't take another chance on a relationship. And she wanted 5 minutes alone with his ex. It would feel so good to give that woman a piece of her mind and a stern lecture about loyalty and support. She certainly did not love him. Not in Laney's book, anyway. You couldn't be in love with someone and abandon them when they needed you the most. She was pretty sure it wasn't her Russ distrusted as much as it was love. He was just looking for an excuse to push her away. Next paperclip, page 291, 292, 293, and 294. He told me his workload had been piling up and he won't be back. Translation, he's not He's just not that into me. Going after him would make me look just as pathetic as begging him to stay. It's déjà vu. Apparently I'm not that kind of woman a man sticks around for. Anderson, that's one of her brothers, set the mug on the counter, then rubbed a hand across his neck. I don't get it. Word all over town is that you've got him hooked. Not so much. She didn't say more. No need to tell him their relationship had been up and down, that it started with being locked up in the jail cell, turned into a cover for working on an investigation that ended with the boarding house room. I'm skipping over a little part to make it PG. Anderson stared at her for the several moments, and then the light went on in his eyes. This is about that night in the park when he arrested you. Yes, she should have known eventually he would put two and two together. I'm not very good at pretending. He knows I had a reason for getting him to take me in. A distraction, Anderson said grimly, so he wouldn't arrest me. She nodded. He doesn't trust me. You should have just told him you did it to keep me out of jail and left it at that. He's a detective, Anderson. He wouldn't have brought the family loyalty thing. He dug deep and found out why it was so important that you not be arrested and have a black mark on your record, she sighed. With your custody issue pending, it wasn't a chance you could afford to take. I love you for what you did, he smiled, but it faded fast. But the promise you made to me is costing you the happiness you deserve. Her brother made a fist and slammed it on the counter. It's complicated, and one way to look at it is if he can't trust me, believe that I had a good reason for not telling him, and that I'm not breaking any laws. Maybe I dodged a bullet, and that it's for the best. You don't really believe that, he said. I might after a while. He closed his eyes for a moment and shook his head. This is my fault. I never should have made you promise. Better yet, I never should have told you about my personal problems in the first place. No, I'm glad you did. She sniffed and put her hand on his arm, and it's a heavy burden to carry alone. I just wish... What? He frowned and a tear rolled down her cheek. I wish Russ didn't have any baggage that makes him not want to take a chance on me, on us. The tears started up again, and Anderson pulled her in for a hug. I'm so sorry, Lanny. Me too, but it will be all right. I know. She grabbed a tissue from the box on the counter and blew her nose. I'm made of stern stuff. It takes a lot more than this to get me down. We'll figure something out. How she loved her big brother for wanting to fix what was wrong with her life, but there was nothing he could do. His child was involved, and that had to be his priority. I can take care of myself, she assured him. I'll be fine. But she didn't believe that, not really. She was in love with Russ, and it had taken losing him to bring that realization into sharp focus. She had a feeling nothing would be all right ever again. Page 299. Anderson Dalton stopped in front of the desk. Gage, nice to see you, Anderson. What brings you in here? I need to talk to Detective Campbell. He looked at both of them before he got steely-eyed gaze settled right on Russ. Alone, if that's all right. No problem, I got paperwork. He straightened, then went into the private office that closed the door. That was page 299. Here's 300, 301, 302, 303, 304, 305, and 306. The angry look on the other man's face made Russ stand ready for anything. He figured Gage had seen it, too, and that's why he didn't leave the office. Nice to see you, Anderson. I doubt that. We need to talk. There was only one thing they had in common. About Laney. You made my sister cry. She doesn't do that very often, and it makes me want to tear you apart. Russ wouldn't mind mixing it up. The other man was about his weight and height, but didn't have the kind of training the cops get. But he understood where Anderson was coming from, having a sister with a responsibility, and Russ had hurt Laney. So what's stopping you? For one thing, my sister wouldn't like it. Anderson almost smiled. What else? I want all the facts out in the open. What might those be? Russ asked. That misunderstanding between you and Lanny is my fault. That was a surprise. Russ stared at him. Go on. The night of the wedding reception, I was drunk from whatever was in that damn punch. You and most of the town, Russ said. What's your point? I decked Skip Webster because he sucker-punched my brother. It was pretty obvious that you were headed over to slap cuffs on me, and Lanny saw what was going on and jumped in the fountain to distract you from arresting me. Why would she risk going to jail? Russ demanded. Charges would probably have been dropped, especially when it turned out that the punch was tampered with. In the moment, no one knew that or what was thinking about it. The other man's expression hardened. Lanny was only thinking about me, about the fact that it would put a black mark on my record. So what if there was an arrest? It wouldn't be that big of a deal. It could for me. Anderson let out a long breath, then he met his gaze. Recently I learned I have a child I never knew anything about. I'm going to file for custody. And we both know the family court system favors the mothers, so any ding on my record would affect my chances of prevailing in the court. So why didn't Lanny just tell me that? I made her promise not to tell anyone. His blue eyes blazed, evidence that he was angry and frustrated with himself and the whole situation. Not even your family? Your father's an attorney, a good one, according to Laney. She made that clear to Russ when they spent the night behind the bars. The last thing I want is to involve my family. Anderson rubbed a hand over his face and suddenly looked tired. It would just hurt them to know that there's a grandchild out there, and they would never know. It's my problem, and I'll deal with it. I'll give them the facts when the case is resolved. And Lanny is the only one who knows? He nodded. And now you. Why are you telling me? Because when Lanny made a promise, she keeps it. End of story. She's so loyal, she would jeopardize her own future in order to keep a vow she made to me. I couldn't live with myself if I was to blame for her unhappiness. Russ felt as if he was in one shootout with bullets coming from every direction. He was having trouble warping his brain around all this. What are you saying? God knows why, but Lanny loves you, and the secret is coming between you. She says you've got your reasons, but personally I think it's an excuse to play around and then duck and run when things get complicated, an easy way out. You're wrong. Anger pulsed through Russ. I know what it feels like when a woman you thought you knew throws you under the bus. When the going gets tough, your career is going full speed backwards, and just when you think things can't get worse, she hands you back the ring and proves you wrong. So you got dumped. Anderson clenched his jaw and the muscles jerked. Detective, you don't know what personal betrayal is until you find out a woman had your baby and for years never bothered to let you know. He was right. Holy crap, Russ thought. That was pretty low. With absolute certainty, he knew that Laney would never do that. With that realization came another one. He acted like an idiot. Okay, Anderson, you win. Believe me, I'd give anything not to come out on top in this situation, but it got to me, he said, and I needed to tell someone. Laney was there for me, and I don't know if I could get through this without her, but there's no way I'm going to let my problem cost her. I appreciate you telling me. Russ felt a weight lift from his shoulders and realized those weren't just words. He really meant what he said. Anderson nodded. I appreciate it if you kept what I just told you confidential. No one will hear it from me. Russ held out his hand and Anderson shook it. He respected what this man was going through and his overriding concern to protect his family, and that Laney was helping him. She was so committed to keeping her word and having her brother's back that she was willing to let Russ think the worst of her. That's what the pain in her eyes was all about. And he hated himself even more for putting it there. He knew now that what he meant by not saying anything also being a way to have someone's back. He was too blindsided by bitterness from his past to see her pure heart. There must be a way to fix what he had done. Thanks, Russ. No problem. He watched Anderson walk outside, get in his truck parked by the curb. Gage must have heard him and leave because he came out of the office. So what was that all about? I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Russ dragged a hand through his hair. Laney, Gage's tone said, gotcha. He rested his hands on his hips. And before you risk your detective shield by asking why I would say that, I'll just give you the facts. Please do. Russ folded his arms over his chest. If Anderson was here to report a stolen cattle or inform us that a crime was committed, you would have happily shared that information. But he's Lanny's brother, so the logical conclusion is that he came to confront you about your relationship with his sister. Gage stopped and made a great show of examining Russ's face. What? I was just wondering where the black eye is, the fat lip. And why would that be? Because you courted his sister and now you're running out on her. Russ opened his mouth to dispute that assessment, then realized there was a lot of truth in it. And it was pointless to ask how he knew all this. Russ Creek Falls had a gossip mill, and that was second to none. Let's just say that Anderson is a very civilized man. So you're really not going to tell me what that he said? It's classified. Russ grinned at his friend's obvious frustration. Lisa will just have to find something else to blog about. I thought we were friends, Gage commented. We are. Good. Then in spirit of friendship, I'm going to let you know that Lanny is working tonight. Gage met his gaze. Go to the Ace in the Hole and buy your own damn beer. Understood. Russ grabbed his leather jacket off the chair and headed out the door. It was always good when a friend's advice coincided with your own plan of action. Okay. Page 309 and 310, 311, 312, 313, 314, 315, 316, 317, 318, 319, 320, 321, 322, 323, 324, 325, and I'm not reading the epilogue to you. You have to read the book yourself, but let's pick up at 309. She lost Russ, although technically she never even had him, which meant she couldn't really lose him. Her attitude sucked, but there was no way to take a time out and adjust it. Sue me, she thought. It was so hard to watch couples in love the night before you had your heart handed back with a firm no thank you. She grabbed 2 beers and handed them to the cowboy and his lady. He gave her a bill and told her to keep the change. So that's what she did. Standing beside the cash register, she surveyed the bar. Almost every stool was taken, and she couldn't see the tables in the main dining area. Just as well. It was probably full of more happy couples for her to envy. A twosome right in front of her got up after leaving money with their bill. Before she could say boo, the empty stools were taken by her brothers. "What do you want?" she said. "Wow," Anderson's eyebrows rose. "If that's the best you can do, your people's skills could use some work." "My skills are just fine, thanks. I don't have to be nice to you." "Says who?" Travis' eyes twinkled. "I'm telling Rosie." "Seriously, you'd rat me out?" "In a hot minute," he said cheerfully. "What are brothers for?" She put a hand on her hip. "Somewhere I read that brothers teach us that you can love someone even though they irritate the crap out of you. Why are you here?" Lanny glanced at Anderson, and then he nodded slightly, letting her know that Travis was aware of what happened between her and Russ. So this was a show of family support. It was all she could do not to cover her face and blubber like a baby. Along with so many other wonderful purposes, brothers were there to cheer you up when a man broke your heart. "You guys are the best," she pointed at each of them. "Don't let that go to your heads, or I'll deny I ever said such a thing." "My lips are sealed," Travis gave her an evil grin, "until the next time you get me in trouble with Mom, and then all bets are off." "We'll see about that. It will go badly for you." She dragged her side of her hand across the neck. "The universal sign for cutting his own throat. What can I get you for your troublemakers?" "Beer," they said together. "Okay." Lanny retrieved 2 from the fridge and noticed the supply was getting low. She made a mental note to restock as soon as business slowed down a bit. Twisting off the cap, she set the drinks in front of both of the brothers. "Cheers." Travis took a sip. "And speaking of troublemakers, I had no idea you were sweet on that detective." "I'll get over it." She knew that this was his last night in town, and her own heart was breaking. Rosie chose that moment to join them. Of course she heard everything. "I knew there was something bothering you. If these 2 clueless cowpokes are here to cheer you up, it must be bad. What happened with you and Detective Dreamy?" There were customers sitting to the right and the left of her brothers, and people with drinks in their hand filling the open area behind them. All of a sudden it got very quiet, as if everyone in the bar was waiting to hear her answer. "Well," she started, "things didn't work out." "That tells me exactly nothing," Rosie informed her. "It didn't work out for you, or was it him? It makes a difference who the not working out part came from." If there was a God in heaven, Lanny thought, the earth would open up and swallow her right now. She waited, but nothing happened, and her boss was looking as if she expected a response. She leaned over and whispered, "You know, Rosie, I don't really want to talk about this right now." "It's all right, honey. This is the best time to get it all out. No one's listening." "What'd you say, Rosie? I can't hear you from the back here." Lanny couldn't see who said it, but the voice was male. She gave her boss a really look. "Everyone cares about you, Lanny." "She's right about that," Anderson chimed in. Lanny pressed her lips together and again fought the urge to cry. People being nice to her was both a blessing and a curse. If they were mean, she could get mad. For a little while, anger would fill up the empty place inside her. But all this caring threatened to reduce her to a puddle of goo, and that wouldn't be good, since she was trying to keep a low profile over this whole thing. And she knew if she started talking about it, she would cry. "Please, Rosie, about Russ and me, let's just call it a draw." Russ wasn't the bad guy. She wasn't enough for him, and she wasn't the one he wanted enough to take the chance with, and her heart cracked a little more when she thought about him being alone. "That means it was him," Rosie said. "No, it's just one of those things," Lanny answered. There was a murmur from the crowd, and Anderson glanced over his shoulder at someone. There was an odd expression on his face when he said, "Stop protecting him, Lanny. He doesn't deserve it." "It's not about being deserving," She stared at her brother, who'd gone all negative and intense, which wasn't like Anderson at all. A person is entitled to their feelings, and you can't force something that just isn't there. You're too good for Russ Campbell, Anderson continued. He's a fool to let you get away. Someday he's going to regret that boneheaded move. Lanny blinked at him. Something was wrong. She knew he'd come here to the bar during the shift in a show of family solidarity and support, but it wasn't like him to trash talk publicly like this. She glanced at Rosie, who was staring into the crowd at the bar. You're one of the most open-minded people I know and a good judge of character. Will you please talk some sense into my brother? Can't, her boss said. Why not? He's right. I never knew what you saw in that outsider anyway. Right on, someone said. Didn't trust him at all. Travis, a little help? Lanny was hoping for backup. Don't look at me. I can't say Anderson is wrong. The sheriff hired him, but I was never in on all that. Her brother shrugged. I can't believe this, she said. He's a snoop and a spy. That was Skip Webster, a.k.a. a sucker-punching weasel, asking questions, insinuating a guy's guilty when he's not. Lanny thought he had some nerve criticizing Russ. After all, he was the one who started the fight on the 4th of July. That guy was the reason she got herself arrested in the first place. Part of her wanted to thank him because otherwise she wouldn't have some wonderful memories of Russ. The other part wanted to call him out for being a hypocritical jerk. The other part had won, and she snapped. Stop it, all of you. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Did someone spike your drinks again? Because this isn't the way Rush Creek Falls folks act. How ungrateful you are. The only thing he's guilty of is trying to keep all of you safe. And this is the thanks he gets? Webster in particular. You could take a lesson from that Russ Campbell, you Neanderthal twit. That man is good and kind, loyal and upstanding. He deserves your thanks for putting his life on hold, and the only thing he wanted was to help this town. You should be ashamed of yourselves. God knows I'm ashamed of you. And you're in love with him, Rosie said, as if she'd known all along. This time the resurrection had passed. Laney realized she didn't care who was there, who knew how she felt. She stared at her boss and said, Yes, I'm in love with him, so there. Now the whole town knew, and she just didn't give a flying fig. There was a movement in the crowd near the bar, and everyone was whispering as they parted to let someone through, and when she looked to see what was going on, Russ was standing right there in front of her. Hey, Lanny. Her heart stuttered. Russ, I didn't see you there. Russ wanted to jump over the bar and pull her into his arms and never let her go. He almost been stupid enough to walk away from her, from the best thing that ever happened to him, without even trying, without even telling her how he felt. I know you didn't see me, he said to her, but Anderson did. That's why he's dumping on me. Anderson? Her brothers went wide. Her eyes went wide as she snapped a look at her brother. It's true, Rosie too. That's right, the older woman said. Lanny looked at the first one and the other, and clearly astonished that they would publicly put him down. But why? Russ knew the answer to that one, but let her brother respond. Even though you're ticked off at him right now, I knew you would defend him because you always do the right thing no matter what. That's just the way you roll. Anderson looked at Russ, wanting him not to blow this opportunity. I thought you should know just how special my sister is. I knew it before I walked in the store. Russ nodded his thanks. Someday I hope you meet a woman even half as remarkable. I'm done looking. Anderson's vow was laced with bitterness of his betrayal. I thought I was done too. Russ figured it was a waste of breath to try to change the other man's mind. No one could have convinced him that he would never meet a woman as beautiful on the inside as she was on the outside. A woman he could count on. Travis was watching the exchange with an expression that was equal parts amusement and confusion. Well, chap my hide and slap me silly. Maybe later. Russ looked at Laney, hoping he could undo the damage he'd done. Laney, we need to talk. She shook her head and backed away from the edge of the bar. Rosie, I'm taking a break now. Take as long as you need, honey, her boss said. I got this. An officer of the law, Russ couldn't say that he always got his man, but he'd be damned if he was going to lose this woman. Lanny quickly moved to the end of the bar and flipped back the top to make her escape, but Russ was waiting for her, blocking her exit. She tried to pass, but he didn't move. Let me pass, she ordered. Not until you hear me out. You've already said more than I want to hear. She tried to maneuver around him, but he sidestepped and checked her. It can't be overstated that I admire your loyalty, but this stubborn streak of yours is kind of annoying. But cute, he thought, as long as she used it for good, and by that he meant by being on his side. Somehow he had to get her there. Isn't it lucky that you're leaving Russ Falls Creek and we won't ever have to deal with me any longer, detective? I'm not going anywhere until we clarify some things, now that he was getting frustrated and everyone in the crowded bar was watching and listening to what they were saying, probably taking notes for the gossip column. It didn't escape his notice that some of her spectators were pointing and whispering and money was changing hands. If he didn't miss his guess, they were betting on the outcome of this standoff. What Russ had to say should be said in private, and he knew just the place. He reached out for her hand and said, "Come with me." She pulled away. "I don't think so." "Wrong answer." Russ scooped her into his arms. Lanny made a surprised little sound, but he ignored her and turned toward the door. A man on a mission. It must have shown on his face, because the customers standing around the bar with drinks in their hands parted like the Red Sea. He moved to the screen door and someone opened it for him. Russ appreciated that, since his arms were full of a wiggling woman. "Let me go," she said angrily. "No, this is humiliating. Obviously you haven't finished making me a joke in this town, one that I can never live down. This isn't a joke to me. All I want is for you to listen to what I have to say." He turned and left her and carried her down the Sawmill Street, past the Rust Creek garage and gas station. "So I'm taking you somewhere you can't run away." Apparently she was getting a clue about what he had in mind. Besides, she asked, "Are you arresting me?" "Yes." "What for?" Failing to yield." "Oh, please, don't pretend you're not relieved that I turned you down." Her tone dripped with sarcasm even as her arm sneaked around his neck. "If I was relieved, would I be carrying you through town?" Their faces were inches apart. "I mean, this is the nicest possible way, Lanny. You're not a feather." "Well, excuse me for not losing 5 pounds on the off chance that you were going to trump up the charges and arrest me again. If I'm so heavy, just put me down." "Nope." Russ carried her to the garage door to the sheriff's office, engaged to open it. Thank God he was still there. "Gotten a citizen's tip from the ace in the hole," he explained. "Here's another one for you," Russ said. "Go home." "Understood." "Wait," Lanny said. "This is a false arrest." Grinning from ear to ear, the sheriff let himself out and closed the door behind him. Russ carried her through the office and stopped in front of the empty cell they occupied the last time she was here. He used one hand to slide the barred door open and then walked inside and shut it, automatically locked with the two of them inside. He set her on the bunk. "Now you're a captive audience." Lanny blinked up at him, and suddenly all the sass and spirit was gone. She looked uncertain and vulnerable. "I don't understand. Why would you do this? It will be all over the town soon, if it's not already. People will think that you and I are—" She was his life, and that's what she was. She'd been there for her brother, for her family, and there was no doubt in his mind that she would do the same for anyone she loved, and he hoped with everything he had that she cared about him. "I love you, Lanny." "Since when?" She sat straight up and folded her arms over her chest and refused to look at him. "Since the first time I saw you." Her gaze jerked to his. "What?" "I walked into the Ace and Hole after working a shift for Gage. You were carrying a heavy tray full of beers, and I wondered how you didn't drop it. Surely the power of the lightning that hit me would knock you off balance." "But you barely said a word to me." Her eyes were wide and beautiful. A man could drown in them and go down smiling. "I couldn't. I knew that if I did, the resistance would be futile." He shrugged, "and I was right." He looked around the cell, remembering that night he arrested her in that wet yellow sundress that was practically transparent, and it didn't take him long for him to break down and annihilate his defenses. He kissed her, and that was lost. The rest was history. He sighed. "Even after that night, you deliberately locked me in here, and I fought against trusting you. I tried to ignore what I felt. The history had been nothing but a horrible warning for you and me both," she said. "My instincts were telling me that you were exactly what you seemed. Beautiful, loyal, someone who put her family first, everything I ever wanted, but I couldn't trust that. My judgment was so far off that I didn't have any faith in what my gut was telling me." "What changed your mind?" There was a tiniest bit of skepticism in her voice. "Two things." He blew out a breath. "When I faced the reality of leaving town and not seeing you every day, it felt wrong, empty. I've gotten used to seeing that pretty face, and leaving you was the last thing I wanted to do." "And what was the other thing?" "Anderson told me about this legal battle and said that why you deliberately got my attention that night he hit Skip Webster, that he couldn't afford to be arrested, and how he made you promise not to tell anyone." "I can't believe he did that." "Just so you know, he swore me to secrecy too, and I plan to honor that promise just like you have. You set a high bar, Miss Dalton." A small smile curved up the corners of her mouth. "So at the bar, Anderson was playing matchmaker?" "Yeah, and he's not the only one." At her questioning gaze, he said, "Gage was at the sheriff's office when Anderson came in. After your brother left, he suggested I go to the Ace and Hole to talk to you." She smiled mysteriously. "What's so funny?" I'm just trying to picture the two of them dressed as Cupid, tights, wings, the whole 9 yards. Oh, wait. Cupid wears a diaper. Either way, not pretty, she said. Yeah, he dragged his fingers through his hair. So in front of everyone tonight, you defended my honor, and you said you loved me. Yep, everyone heard, she agreed. Then there's only one thing left to do. Close the case. He moved in front of her and went down on one knee. Marry me. Yes, she grinned up, threw herself into his arms, and said, I give myself up. To find out what happens, you have to read this great book. I'm giving it a 10. So that is a must read on my list. 20 is outstanding, but a 10 gets you to pick up this book and hopefully make you want to go read this wonderful book for yourself on all the parts I didn't read to you and all the parts left to come. So I hope you check this book out. You won't regret it.